Welcome to DarshanTalks, powered by the Kulkarni Law Firm. This podcast explores the challenges and opportunities facing FDA-regulated companies. Join us as we discuss the latest trends, news, and insights with experts and executives in the field.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Darshan Talks. I'm here with Dr. Ravit Dotan, and I'm going to have the good doctor explain who she is, why she's so cool, and why everyone wants to talk to her, and she has graciously accepted to be on to talk to us a little bit more. But Ravit, after you.
Thank you, Darshan. That's probably the best introduction that I've ever had. So thank you so much. I'm cool because I do crafts.
You do crafts, okay. We got to discuss that at a different point for sure.
Yeah, not necessarily successfully, but I do them.
Okay.
But when I don't do crafts, I'm interested in the field of AI ethics, tech ethics more broadly. So really any data technology, AI, machine learning, data science. I'm interested in how these technologies impact humanity, the planet, animals, and how to make sure that their impact is positive and helpful. And I'm doing that under several professional hats. I am doing research as an academic. I'm focusing on governance, so especially how can we help companies implement work processes that will result in more responsible technology? So what does it mean to govern AI responsibly, especially in the context of a tech company, and also in the context of the entire financial system that backs tech companies, such as investors, procurement team, insurance companies? How can we support them in getting involved in helping the technology go in a safe and beneficial direction? So that I have an academic hat and I do academic research on these questions, but I also have a private sector hat. So I do consulting and speaking about these topics, and I work with, unsurprisingly, tech companies and investors on cultivating responsible AI approaches. And so all of my efforts are geared towards moving conversations on AI ethics from talk to action.
I mean, it would be wrong to say that this is not the most topical conversation we could have ever, considering just all the stuff going on around AI, tech, and ethics. Let's start with the beginning. And usually I try to delve directly into the implications on pharma, but I think I'm too easily distracted by all the current implications. Let's start with the beginning, which was there was a whole discussion. I want to say now, it feels like forever ago, but it was probably like 2 years ago when Google got rid of some of their AI experts, and people were like very, very worried about what that meant. As someone who does AI now, with the benefit of 2020 hindsight, what do you think about Google's decision at that point to get rid of their AI experts, especially AI ethics experts, especially at a time when Google now is going, we're behind the 8 ball on AI?
Yeah, I love this phrase. We're behind the 8 ball. Yeah, so Google are definitely not the only ones, right? This is something that we're seeing companies firing their AI ethics team.
Getting that next, but
yeah. So very recently we saw Twitter doing that after Elon Musk came in. We saw that in other companies as well. I think Microsoft very recently also fired a bunch of people. Sometimes it happens because of financial cuts. Sometimes it happens because of disagreement with the ethics team, like we saw in the case of Axon. And so it's complicated. On the one hand, it's a negative signal, right? We have a company that decides to save money, or in the worst case scenario, fire because of disagreement the team that is supposed to be in charge of steering the technology in a society in a way that is beneficial to society. On the other hand, I also have a worry about these teams generally, especially at big tech companies. It's very easy to use AI ethics offices for ethics washing, right? It's great for visibility, but the question is, are they doing anything? So in a
Right.
way, I prefer that they fire them because at least we know, it's more difficult for them to pretend.
Yeah. Um, but you make a really interesting comment of it being beneficial to society. And this is really important in light of very recent events where Elon Musk came out and he said, you know what, we want to put a moratorium on any more AI development until we get the ethics figured out, which is kind of hilarious when you think about the fact that Twitter was involved in getting rid of some of the AI ethics people. But ignoring that part for a second, this idea of beneficial to society, people pretend that that's a one-way street. I think beneficial, in my personal experience doing research, beneficial is a two-way street. You give up something to get something else. So for example, you might give up privacy to get security. You might give up security to get privacy. And you might give up, I'm making this up, but development to get easier tools. I may have phrased that last one wrong. But the point being, what are the factors you're usually dealing with in the context of AI that decides whether something is beneficial or not?
Yeah. So one factor is what the intended use of the technology is,
Okay.
right? There are so many ways to use AI technologies in ways that are socially beneficial. So literally what the technology does is help people. So one aspect of being socially beneficial is just what is the intended use of the technology? What do you mean it to do? What's your business model? But the other thing that's more common is what are the unintended consequences? And so sometimes you have a technology, whatever the use case, right? Like you just want to make money. But what are the unintended consequences? I think that's the trade-off. So typically the unintended consequences that people talk most about are fairness, deepfakes, privacy violations, lack of explainability. Here's an example. You can use AI to make decisions on loans for you, right? For underwriting. As a business, you could get the benefit of efficiency. It could be faster. You're not going to need to pay a human. So that's the benefit for you as a business. In a way, it's also kind of beneficial to society because you're, I guess, able to serve more people. But what are the unintended consequences of it? There was a recent study, very interesting, specifically about AI for mortgage loans. Mortgage loans are very important because owning a house is really important for social mobility. So, and most people do need a mortgage loan to buy a house. So if they're unable to get that mortgage loan, they're likely unable to get a house, which limits their social mobility. In the US, there's a huge discrimination problem when it comes to mortgage loans. So Black people are most discriminated. A person who is Black is 54% less likely to getting their loan approved relative to a person who's exactly the same, except that they're not Black. So that is bad. But then the people who ran the research decided to check, well, what would happen if we just feed all of the applications, because there's a mandate to report mortgage applications. What happens if you just if AI made all of those decisions? So they fed it into some off-the-shelf mortgage decision AI system, and the discrimination just became much worse. It became 67% less likely to get the mortgage loan. People think of AI garbage in, garbage out, but the reality is, here's a saying I came up with, garbage in, landfill out.
Wow, I like that. Okay. Yeah.
And it's so you meant to do business by, I'm going to give loans here, people need loans, it's going to be good, and I'm going to make money, and I'm going to make it more efficient by using AI, it's going to be good. But you didn't mean that the discrimination in society would become worse. And if you're serving a lot of applicants, you're impacting maybe millions of people. So you're making a real damage to society. So that's the unintended consequence. And that's where AI becomes the opposite of beneficial.
I really hate to go down the whole mortgage route, but let's play devil's advocate here, because that's what ethicists do. And now I'm going back to my teaching of bioethics, but that's fine. But we're talking about, you said 54% of loans were rejected if you were.
So if you are a Black person, you are 54% less likely to have your loan approved.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We will go with exactly the phrasing you used. I guess my question is it possible that being human, you're able to bring it down to 54% from 67%, which is a dispassionate machine?
Cool. Yeah, I like this reversal. So I wouldn't say that the machine is dispassionate.
Okay.
Let's start with that, because it's not, because it's making this discrimination.
Sure.
I also wouldn't say that the machine is dispassionate. Like, I wouldn't associate it with any kind of like emotions or feelings or thoughts. People are making the loan decisions still, but they're making them by adopting recommendations made by an algorithm automatically without questioning them. So it's still, to me, a human decision-making process. It's just that we've abdicated some of the decision-making to some math.
Sure.
And I'm thinking, yeah, it's interesting. I think with the reversal, we would still be with the outcome of, if we're not careful and we're using AI, we're going to make our social problems worse.
I'm trying to take exactly what you're saying and I'm trying to apply it into the life sciences world. One of the big issues in the life sciences is the lack of diversity in clinical trials. This idea that we have too many cis white individuals, or cis white male individuals, being represented in clinical trials. And there's nothing inherently wrong about having those individuals in there. We just want our drugs to represent more people because they're going to be tried on more people. So my question for you is, do you think it makes sense to use AI to help with clinical trial recruitment, or do you think it's going to worsen the problem based on what we just saw with the mortgage crisis?
Okay, so I think it really depends on how the AI is used.
Okay.
Because as we see from the data, it's not like humans are good in making unbiased decisions. It's not a good situation that right now we see this discrimination against Black people in mortgage loans. We make mistakes, and we make racist mistakes. AI could potentially actually decrease biases. It can make it better, but only if you use it in the right way. And the same goes for the clinical trials. If we just kind of use AI, indiscriminately, just like put an AI into the mix, there's a really, really good chance that we will see the same phenomenon where the discrimination that we already had as humans is just exacerbated, and we have garbage in, landfill out.
I'm really, first of all, digging the garbage and landfill out thing.
Yeah.
I think it should stick.
Okay.
That should be the name of your book.
I'm really glad you said that, because I mentioned this thing to my partner and he's like, no.
No, I like it.
And then I thought, okay, I'm not going to mention it to anyone else. It obviously sucks. Like, okay,
no. You got to go with that.
And I think that's where, we talked about those ethics committees previously. That's where they can shine if we let them do this kind of work, right? They can guide the company in how to integrate those data technologies in ways that, first of all, don't make the discrimination worse, but second of all, maybe even improve it, right? So that's when it becomes socially beneficial.
So in the lives, this is where this gets a little bit more fun, because there are two social goods we're going to talk about in the life sciences. The one social good is diversity and representation, which is really, really important. Like ignoring the ethical implications of it from a pure healthy perspective, it's really good to have diversity and representation in your clinical trials. The second angle is cost. And everyone knows that the price of drugs is quite bluntly too high. I sound like that dude. I don't know how old you are, but I'm old enough to remember this one guy from New York would go, the price of rent is too high. That's what I feel like. You have no idea who I'm talking about, which is funny to me. But there was a guy who would do that. But anyways, my point being, price of drugs is too high. If we're able to use AI in the pre-screening process, in those specific situations, we might be able to reduce the number of people who really wouldn't qualify for this drug. That would reduce the amount of cost associated per study, because only the people who actually qualify would get tested. And that bottleneck that you have gets resolved. The problem is, if the system is ethically flawed, does that decrease diversity, or can it be set up in a way that maintains or even increases diversity while simultaneously increasing the throughput and streamlining the throughput? But at this moment, it is inherently at conflict with each other, the idea of cost versus diversity. So talk me through the ethics of that.
Okay, so first of all, I want to acknowledge that you're totally right. We do have trade-offs here. We have trade-offs, and those trade-offs might be revenue versus unethical value. It does happen. It's not the first place it's going to happen. Companies are familiar with those dilemmas, and they make decisions of various kinds depending on various factors. It is not unreasonable to expect a company, especially a pharmaceutical company, to make the ethical decision, even if it does cost it money. Having said that, it's not always the case that you have revenue that's going to conflict with your values. And I think the wise thing is to figure out how you can have both. So I don't think it's a choice between either you have AI and cost effectiveness or you have diversity. No, the question is how you're using the AI, how you're building it. So if you are building your AI in-house, it's about the development process. If you are buying the AI from outside, it's about your procurement process. And in a way, you're in an advantage because you get to choose between different vendors, and you get to ask them questions about responsibility, about diversity, about privacy, and you get to make demands in your contract with them. Yeah, so I think that there's a sweet spot to strive for. I do think companies can have both. And I think also conceptually diverse, if we're talking specifically about diversity, it is aligned actually with revenue, because fairness can mean having your product work equally well for people of various backgrounds. But if your product works well for people of various backgrounds, guess what? You increase your customer base.
So I'm going to argue with you, not necessarily, because the argument would be that in the case of a drug, when it's approved, it's very rare that it gets approved for a certain race or not. There's a drug called Bidil where that actually did happen, but in most cases, it tends to be it's approved for everyone, and race is not a gating factor. But I'm gonna challenge you on this. I'm gonna challenge you further, because that's just the fun of having these conversations. You talked about this difference between development and procurement process, and you talked about the value. So let's talk about the procurement process first, just to start from somewhere. The key piece is you said we can ask them to see where they get their data from, so you can actually find out more about what was the basis of the AI that they've developed, what they've trained them on, all that good stuff. My first component of that would be most companies are hesitant to give that up. Most companies will say, we've trained them, we represent that it represents a fuller data set. Most companies, if I was the attorney for that company, I wouldn't go in with, let me show you all my data sources, because those are confidential, those are proprietary. I'm not giving them up that easily. So there is a certain amount of black box you always have to deal with in a procurement process.
So I'm going to push back.
Please.
No, I think it's a wonderful, wonderful point. And I will add another layer of complexity. If you are buying an AI product, it means that you don't necessarily have this expertise in-house.
Yes.
How are you even going to be able to assess?
Yes.
Even if they do give, I mean, you're right. They're not going to want to divulge all of the technicalities because it's proprietary.
Right. Exactly.
But also you're not going to be in a position to evaluate it. That's not your expertise. That's the point. That's why you're buying it.
Exactly.
There are two ways around it that I recommend.
Ooh. Okay.
One is external audits.
Yes.
just as you would do in other areas where you don't have the expertise, but you want someone who does to give you some assurance that the company is doing a good job. And then this external auditor could be under NDA. You're not, so everyone is confident. They're not going to tell you. It's going to be a secret, but you're going to have an assurance that that company indeed does a good job when it comes to any AI fairness metrics that you care about, say fairness, say privacy, or anything else. So that's one route to go. Another route to go is to ask them not about the technical details, like in a way you didn't really care about that, but you do care about the bottom line. So you can ask them, for example, so are you checking fairness at all? Which metrics are you using? And what are the numbers? I'm not asking to see their data even. Just tell me. Start with just tell me and, sign on it. So, it's more difficult to lie. But tell me, how do you measure equality? What did you do to make sure that it works for everyone? Tell me.
But is there benchmarking to evaluate what fairness looks like?
Yes. Is there even a benchmark? Is a fantastic question to ask. Is there even a benchmark? And then what are the results? What progress are you making over time? And also, what governance structures do you have in your company that developed this process and carry it through? Like, what are you doing to even try? And then ask them, suppose I use your product and a fairness issue comes up. Who is responsible for, first of all, detecting the issue? And second of all, resolving the issue?
So I would agree with all of those statements, right? I think from an AI ethics perspective, I agree with all those things. And we can put all of that in there into a contract. I'll add another complexity.
Yeah.
I can tell you, I've written 30-page contracts. I've written 150-page contracts. Like, it just depends on what you're trying to do. The truth is, in the end, what people really land up looking at is what was the real goal, which is I want to get a system that will spit out subjects. Is it still spitting out subjects? I don't have a problem. Until someone goes in and says, I'm seeing a problem with your subjects, you aren't really going to know that there's a problem. Most people don't go back and start auditing their own processes. It's one of those situations of don't look for problems you don't know about. And I don't mean this in just the drug world. I mean this in any world doing anything. It's just more exacerbated in the drug world because in many cases, the identity of the patients is confidential. So unless you have a DSMB or someone who's going in after the fact and you actually add in another duty for them to do these check-ins to see what is the makeup of your audience, you'll never find out until the end of the study. And by that time, it's too late. So how do you even control for something like this? And how do you even set up a system that'll look for this actively?
Okay. So the complication that you're pointing out is that as a user, if I need subjects from my study, I'm going to, for example, use this AI system to detect subjects for me, but I'm not going to know what my subjects, what the distribution of my subject is until it's too late.
Correct. Correct.
Yes. In a way, it happens like whenever I purchase an AI system, I don't yet know how it's going to perform on my data until I've already done it.
Right.
And so, going back to this idea of asking for fairness metrics, I don't need to ask them about my data. They should tell me about their own testing, what they've done.
Well, I think that sounds great in theory, but at a realistic level, these guys are developing these systems right now. We don't actually know. AI is too new to actually know how good it actually is. You'd only.
I disagree.
Oh, tell me more. I love this.
Yeah. I'll give an example from another domain. Okay. One of the more famous examples of AI ethics, one of the first ones, Amazon. Amazon developed an AI system to sort through resumes of job candidates because they have too many people who are applying. It's a huge company. And so they need help. The ultimate goal in the ideal scenario is that the system would just spit out the resumes of the people that they would hire.
Right.
Great. Right. So suppose it wasn't Amazon even. Suppose it was an independent vendor that was going to sell it later. It would be complicated for you, similar complication to what we said, because you don't know about your own job candidate pool. Right.
Right.
But here's what happened with Amazon. So they built a system. It took them like a couple of years, and they experimented with it. They tried various things, and after a while, they realized on their own testing data, which was just all the old resumes that people submitted to Amazon, on their testing data, they noticed actually something's weird is going on with this algorithm. It's not really spitting out women's resumes, and that's weird because we don't, I don't think they had gender as a feature because that's usually, let's say, frowned upon / illegal. But still, they were noticing this problem that it didn't really spit out women's CVs, resumes. And so they decided to actually look into it. So see what they did first, they checked for the outcome on their testing data before they unleashed it on new candidates. And then they decided to figure out why. And what happened was that resumes that had the words women's on them, like women's college, were penalized.
Interesting.
So that is, and also there were a couple of specific women's colleges that if you had that college on your resume, you would be penalized. And so the reason that I'm mentioning this story is that it is not too early at all. This story, I think it was 2016. It was a while ago.
I remember this case, but yeah.
Yeah. And so the point is, when a company develops an AI technology to sort through a pool of candidates for whatever, be it resumes, be it people for clinical trials, there are ways to test the fairness before you actually use the AI system, in real life.
So two responses to that. The first response to that is we both know the advantage of a prospective study versus a retrospective study. What you're talking about here, by definition, is a retrospective study. So it inherently would not be as good.
But this study is not. So I imagine the vendor who creates the AI system, they're the ones who would do, who would do this testing. When you get it, the client, now, hopefully you get some reassurance that they have done that fairness testing. So when you apply it to your clinical trial pool, you don't have to do this test after. I mean, you could do it after the fact to see how it turned out, but it's who can do it before you even begin. So you're not entering that realm of complication. You know what I mean?
I think so. I think, and I'm going to repeat what I think you said back to you to tell me if I got it right. What you're saying is that the difference between prospective studies versus retrospective studies only happens in the context of an actual study. And it's not an actual study until you as the client are actually doing the study. My point is the testing itself, you would have to do it prospectively versus retrospectively to actually know if it's working. So instead of looking at would you have hired, the question is, here are the results. Did they hire is a better analysis than would they have hired. Because that's the difference between a prospective versus a retrospective testing process anyways. So that's my first thought process. My second thought process, and now that we know more about AI, I can actually formulate the question, which I wouldn't have been able to do before. What you pointed out was certain women's colleges, certain majors were identified as problematic. AI is infamous for the black box problem, which is we don't know why it made the decisions that it did. I'm curious how we know, how Amazon, I guess, identified that was the problem if we inherently don't know that how AI makes decisions.
Okay. So they didn't reveal how they found out. So I don't know the details. But even though, yes, AI today, the kind of AI models that are used today are generally speaking black boxes, but there are techniques to figure out some things that we want to know about them. So it's not, so it's not like, oh, it's absolutely impossible to know why something happened. And even if something is a total black box, not even AI, whatever, you can always experiment it in some way and find out. In a way, the human body is a black box.
Sure.
And we find some things out. And so here's an easy way to figure things out with an AI system. You see some of I don't know if this is how they did it, but maybe this is how they
Sure.
could have done it.
Sure.
You are noticing that it's spitting out fewer resumes of women.
Yeah.
You'll just get a bunch of those resumes of women that are actually good
commonality.
candidates and have been penalized unjustifiably. And you're just like, even as a human, looking at them and coming up with an hypothesis about like, what do they have in common? And then you're running them through the algorithm and you're seeing where they penalize. So that's, that's an easy way to engage with a black box, even if it's a total black box, which often there are things that developers and engineers can do. It's not like they're like totally,
Well, first of all, I think you educated me on this. I always thought it was a total black box, so I appreciate the clarification. But the second part of it is I always thought that what you're describing to me is the classic causation versus correlation problem. You'd land up with, we're seeing this be a consistent thing. Is it accurate? It may very well be, but we don't actually know. We don't know whether it's causation, which is this person goes to this university automatically, you're going to get penalized. You might, but we just don't know. I guess it's one of the difference between that and say in regular human research is that the human body hasn't changed in the last millennia. So we can go, most of it applies the same way, except with AI, we literally change it iteratively on a, weekly basis. And we go, yeah, let's try this one now. So we can't say that what we learned from the last lesson applies to this one because we changed the actual AI for this purpose. So the rules don't always keep applying, if that makes sense. But we're well past time already. I'm going to let you have the last word before I go. But
okay. So I just want to add about this causation versus correlation. So obviously, the thing that I was describing would be just a potential first step that an engineer could do just to get an hypothesis going. But then they could go into interventions and manipulations, which are things that are like typically, associated with causation. So it could be a first step of an exploration. There are other strategies, more technical strategies. But all of this to say, I just want to, as we close out, I want to bring us back to the thread that started this conversation, which is when you buy an AI product, you can and should, in my opinion, inquire about what the company has done to ensure AI ethics standards, for example, fairness. And you can do that even if you don't have the expertise yourself, either by doing an external audit or just asking them things about governance that are typically not proprietary. Just tell me, is there a benchmark for fairness? What did you do? You could learn a lot from this question.
I love it. Ravit, thank you so much for coming on. If people want to reach you and they want to ask you more questions, how can they best reach you?
Yeah. Okay. So there are two ways to reach me that are best. First of all, I have a website. My website is just my name.com. So ravitdotan.com. I produce a lot of resources in AI ethics and I put them all on my website. So you're welcome to come by and take a look. I also post a lot on LinkedIn. So you can go to my LinkedIn page. Also, I'm the only one with my name. So just search for my name. And then you can contact me either through LinkedIn or on my website. I have a contact me page. I both go to my email inbox anyway. So choose whichever of the two that you prefer.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming on, Ravit.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Darshan Talks. Remember, the information we discuss is for educational purposes only and is not legal advice. For additional valuable insights and updates, be sure to subscribe to our newsletter at DarshanTalks.com. Darshan Talks is powered by the Kulkarni Law Firm.